rub shoulders with Corey at all afterwards? Did he stay around? I mean, what was the atmosphere in tournaments in those days? Did everyone go their own way, or was there,
I went my own way.
Okay.
I was
walked
crazy
back up
shy.
18 and across 17 to your house. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was probably one of the shyest human beings alive at that point in my life. Like, once I became good friends with someone, I wasn't shy at all. But anyone I didn't know, it was very hard for me to go and talk to somebody. And so I would just kind of hide in a corner somewhere. That was me. That's why I like practicing so much on my own. It was just my little safe haven. So I was crazy shy. And I probably had the opportunity to rub shoulders with a few guys. I remember, so it must have been that same year. Ian Baker-Finch would have been defending champ, I think.
Right.
And they had the range set up kind of towards Otai Hangar, kind of an old, like a orchard or something, or a nursery out there. They had a range off, I think, Amazing Guard Road or something. Anyway,
yep.
I was out there in the evening on my own, one of the last guys on the range, and Ian Baker-Finch shows up, and he saw me hitting balls, and he came and put his balls right down next to mine and started chatting with me. And of course, I'm crazy shy, right? And there's Ian Baker-Finch. I know who he is, a defending champ, and so that was one of my really good memories of that tournament. Was he talked to me and asked me how I was doing in the tournament and told me good luck, and that was huge for me. I was just a young kid. That was monstrous for me. So he was one of the nicest guys. And as I found out later, he was always one of the nicest guys on tour.
They say that, yeah. And they say, I mean, a beautiful ball striker as well. But sadly, something happened later in his career where he couldn't transfer the practice range onto the golf course, which is a real shame.
Yeah, I think he was more known for his putting, his short game, especially his putting. He was a phenomenal putter.
Right. Okay. So at this point, obviously, you were getting good. You'd won the Bledisloe Cup at still a relatively young age. By that stage, did you have your mind set on professional golf? I mean, what was your thoughts?
Oh yeah. I was set on that probably from age 15 when I played that New Zealand Open at Royal Wellington. That I knew that's what I wanted to do, and so 18 was a good age for me. I think the year before I'd lost a playoff in the North Island Boys to Craig Perks, and missed a putt of like 2 feet, if that, on this in the playoff hole. And that kind of haunted me. I was like, and I'd blown a lead at, the year before in the New Zealand Boys at it was at Hutt Golf Course, and I had the lead with 3 to play and bogeyed the last 3 to lose by 2 to Glenn Goldfinch. And but I was young, and that was kind of one of my first big junior tournaments, or my first New Zealand Boys, and so at 18, I went to Christchurch and I won the New Zealand Boys down there. And then I won the Bledisloe Cup, and I also won the, it was called the, maybe the Steinlager or whatever, the under 23s at, in Hawke's Bay at Bridge.
Right. They still have that there. I think the under 21.
That was a huge tournament, and I won that I ended up winning that by 10 shots. So it was a big year. So I kind of stepped out of the zone of coming close and not quite getting there. To won the New Zealand Boys, won the Bledisloe Cup, and I won the under 23s in the Hawke's Bay by 10. And I suddenly realised I can do this now. I know how to win now.
So you obtained a scholarship to the States. How did that come about, and where did you end up doing your study and playing your golf?
Yeah, so a bunch of guys. Grant Waite, Greg Turner, Matthew Lane had gone, Phil Aitken, a few other guys had gone to the States on scholarships. And me being crazy shy, I didn't really stand out to anybody except for when my golf score, but I wasn't a personality that people remembered. So I kind of didn't know how to go about things, and finally, between my dad and Glenn Morrison, we figured out, let's just write a bunch of letters to universities that we know of in the States. I knew I wasn't good enough to turn pro, and that was kind of the next best thing. There wasn't a great junior program in New Zealand at that point. There was soon after that. But so I wrote to Oklahoma State, Wake Forest, UCLA, University of Houston. And University of Houston, a few of them got back to me, but University of Houston said, try Houston Baptist University. And they said they had a great golf program there. So I tried there. And luckily, Glenn Joyner, Australian guy, Glenn Joyner, was a senior there. And he recognized the tournaments that I'd won. He'd seen that I'd played for New Zealand and Australia as an amateur in the series over there. And he basically told the coach, if this guy can do that, he's good enough. Right. And so I went over there, and lo and behold, I didn't know it at the time, but Colin Montgomery was on the team.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Glenn Joyner was there. Jeff Wagner was there, another Australian. Myself, a couple of Danish guys that were very good golfers. And we had one American on the team, and he couldn't stay on the team because he kept failing out of school. He couldn't keep his grades. So it was a team of foreigners. We had a little Mexican guy on the team as well. So I ended up at a great school, and I ended up playing on the team right away. I didn't have to I was good enough to make the team each time. And the good thing about that is Colin Montgomery, he was a senior. So my first year there, I played with Colin every day. And got to see him later, at tournaments in Australia when he came down. But that was one of the cool things, to see him play. I mean, he was super good then, and you knew he was going to be good. You didn't know how good, but very cool experience.
Yeah, fantastic. So you would have done 3 or 4 years there. What was the degree?
So I was there. I went there in '86. And I did 3 years at Houston Baptist, but it was a small school, and they ended up dropping a couple of the other athletic programs, and that didn't allow them to be Division I NCAA, which is the top. So my coach said, I'm too good to be playing Division II. You need to transfer to another school for your senior year. So I ended up transferring to Southwest Louisiana, which is now Louisiana Lafayette. And that's where Craig Perks was. So he was a senior there, and I was going to be a senior. So I ended up, we were roommates there. And I was always friends with Craig, but, he was Palmerston North, I was Paraparaumu, and we just saw each other at tournaments, but we became like best of friends that senior year. And I was able to graduate. I got a business degree, which I've never used. So I completed my 4 years, but my last year was in Louisiana. First 3 were at Houston Baptist. Okay,
so you came back. I mean, at this stage, you're still obviously amateur. You're playing university golf. Where was that transition into the professional ranks and I guess the playing for your pay?
So when I graduated, I met a couple of guys. I met this guy at one of the local clubs where I practiced. And over there, some of the courses you could wear jeans and stuff. He'd just show up in jeans and a golf shirt, but it was always untucked and just looked like, one of those guys. He's a 95 shooter kind of at best.
Lance Phelps like?
Yeah, kind of. Not quite as crude. And anyway, he basically asked me, he says, "Oh, what's your plans?" And I'm thinking of trying to get up to the Canadian tour, and then when the Australian tour school comes around to try and qualify over there. I said, but I'm kind of, it costs money and I don't have any money. And he goes, well, I'll help you out. And little did I know this guy owned a bunch of plasma banks or something throughout the state. Anyway, it was worth about 200 or 300 million. Like, it was crazy.
Right.
And so he basically, my first year, I played a few mini tour events on it's called the Emerald Coast Tour, which is around Pensacola, the top of the panhandle of Florida. They had a little Emerald Coast Tour there. Joe Durant was one of the names out of there. A few other names that are on the PGA Tour. I can't remember right now. But a lot of good players played that little mini tour. And then I headed up to Canada to try and qualify for that tour, because the Canadian Tour was a proper tour with 4 rounds and a cut. The equipment companies were there, like Titleist was handing out balls and gloves and so forth. So it was run like a proper tour. I wanted to play a tour like that. rather than mini tours, which are just basically legalized gambling. And so I headed up there, and this guy, his name was James Marceau, but he called himself Mickey. So Mickey basically gave me, I think it was $5,000, and to get by, and give me a phone call if you need some more, and we'll wire it into a bank account in Canada. And so I qualified for the tour, and I really didn't need. Maybe I got another $2 or $3,000 from him, but that was it. I was kind of up and running, and so if it wasn't for him, I don't know what I would have done. But he got me up and running. I had enough money to get by, and then kind of learned the ropes of tour golf, and luckily played good enough to. My first year wasn't great, but I played good enough to get by. So.
Okay. So during that period, were you coming home in the summers to see family and perhaps play the New Zealand Open that was pretty much anchored at Paraparaumu during that period?
Yeah, so summers over here were winters down there. So
Yep.
I'd play Canadian Tour started late May on the west coast in Victoria, where I am now, on Vancouver Island. And it would work its way across the country. So a lot of us drove. I drove up from the States, and I had a car, and so we worked our way across the country and ended up on the East Coast and finished probably late August. The tour finished maybe early September, but I think late August. I'd drive back to Louisiana, practice down there for a while, and then the Australian tour would start up in October, and I'd fly over and start the Australian tour. So I wouldn't go to New Zealand. I'd do my practice in Louisiana.
Yep.
And then play the Australian tour to Christmas, and then come home for Christmas to Paraparaumu, and stay with my sister and hang out there until the Australian tour started up again after New Year's. And then usually I'd come back to New Zealand in March when the Australian tour would finish, a couple of weeks back home, and then fly back to Louisiana. And that's kind of where I practiced and had my base before heading back up to Canada again in May. So that was my life for 15, 16 years.
So 1995, I was a young fella myself, and I was living in Melbourne. 1995, Kingston Heath was the Australian Open that year. They hosted the Australian Open, and I was over there working, raking bunkers and filling sand divots. And I remember on the first round, there was this Kiwi up the top of the leaderboard, Paul Devenport from Paraparaumu. How was that?
It might have been the second round.
Second round, you're up in front. Okay, there you go.
I think it was second round. I think I shot 69 in the first round, which was good, really good, solid round around Kingston Heath. But I wasn't leading. And then second round, I think number 12 the par 5. Is that right?
10's par 3, 11 to the quarter. 12's the long one that goes up. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So 12, I eagled 12. I got home and holed maybe a 30-footer or something for eagle, and that's when I hit the lead. And there was a big scoreboard right behind the green, and where there was a little bit of weight on the next tee, and I glanced over, worst thing I should have done, and saw my name right at the top of the leaderboard and went, holy cow, I'm leading. And proceeded to double bogey the next. And then kind of limped it home from there, not too bad. And I think I just played pretty average on the weekend. I can't remember I finished, but probably mid-teens, maybe 20, somewhere around there in the tournament. But
it was Greg Norman's tournament that year. I think he won by an absolute bunch. He might have even won.
He was dueling it out with Peter McWhinney, I think, in that one. And I think it was basically they were the only two in it on Sunday. They blew everyone else away, and then Norman ended up. I don't know if he won by a lot over Peter McWhinney, but 2 or 3 maybe. But they were dueling it out that back nine. But yeah, they ran away with it, those two.